Imagine a peaceful Wednesday afternoon. A 57-year-old grandfather is working in his own backyard, completely at ease, enjoying a normal day of manual labor right on his own property. Two young men walk up his driveway, seemingly asking a harmless question about buying some lawn equipment. You think it's just a regular neighborhood interaction. But in broad daylight, a flash of violence shatters the afternoon quiet. A life is taken in seconds, and over a decade later, the distinct identity of the killers remains locked behind a wall of silence. You think your own backyard is safe, until the shadows find you in the sun. Good evening. I'm Marcus Hayes, and tonight on Case Files After Dark, we are stepping into a brazen, daylight mystery from the Triad that has left detectives baffled for over 11 years. This is the unsolved homicide of Vann Yates. To understand how a routine afternoon turned into a horrific crime scene, we have to travel back to January 2015 in High Point, North Carolina. 57-year-old Vann Yates was a hard-working family man, a father, and a grandfather who took immense pride in his property and his work. He was known in his neighborhood as a kind, approachable soul who spent a lot of time outdoors. It was Wednesday, January 21st, 2015. The winter air was crisp, but the sun was out. Vann was in the backyard of his home in the 1600 block of Fairfield Street, a residential area in South High Point. He wasn't alone. He had hired a local landscaper to help him clear some brush and work on the lawn. Around 1:30 in the afternoon, two young men casually walked up the driveway. They approached Vann and the landscaper, striking up a conversation. They pointed to some lawn equipment Vann had out and asked if it was for sale. It seemed like a completely ordinary, everyday interaction. But within seconds, the friendly facade completely vanished. One of the men pulled out a firearm, aggressively demanding money and valuables. It was a daylight ambush. Before Vann or the landscaper could even process what was happening, a struggle ensued, and a gunshot tore through the afternoon quiet. Vann Yates was struck directly in the chest. As Vann collapsed to the ground, the two attackers didn't stay to look for cash. They panicked. They turned on their heels and sprinted down Fairfield Street. The landscaper, terrified but desperate to get help, watched as the two men ran toward a small, tan or gold-colored Honda passenger car that was idling nearby. Inside the driver's seat sat a black female, waiting with the engine running. The two suspects dove into the car, the tires screeched, and the vehicle sped away, vanishing into the High Point traffic. Emergency responders rushed to Fairfield Street, but the damage was done. Vann Yates was pronounced dead at the scene. High Point Police Department detectives immediately flooded the area, looking for witnesses and scouring for surveillance footage. As they began digging into recent police reports, they uncovered a terrifying reality. Vann Yates wasn't the first target. Just 24 hours prior, on January 20th, the same suspects had committed two other armed robberies in High Point, one on nearby Prospect Street and another on Springfield Road. In those cases, they had used the same tactic, approaching unsuspecting people during the day, demanding cash at gunpoint, and fleeing in a tan Honda. But on Fairfield Street, their robbery turned into a cold-blooded murder. Because the landscaper and other witnesses got a clear look at the suspects in the bright afternoon sun, detectives were able to put together incredibly detailed descriptions. The shooter was described as a young black male, roughly 5 feet 6 inches tall, with a thin build. But it was his face that carried a permanent clue. He had a highly visible, distinct scar directly under his right eye. Furthermore, when he spoke, witnesses noted he had a very noticeable, distinct accent, possibly African or Jamaican. The second suspect was a taller black male, around 5 feet 11 inches tall, also with a thin build. And the getaway driver was identified as a black female, with her hair styled in long dreadlocks or twists. High Point Police released detailed composite sketches of the man with the facial scar, broadcasting them across North Carolina news stations. They had a specific vehicle description, a clear physical profile, an accent, and a timeline of 3 crimes in 48 hours. By all accounts, this case should have been solved within a week. Yet, as the days turned into months, the tan Honda completely vanished from the triad. The tips slowed down to a crawl, and a heavy, frustrating silence settled over the investigation. More than 11 years have passed since Vann Yates was taken from his family in his own backyard. The small, tan Honda has likely been scrapped, repainted, or sold a dozen times over. The young men who walked up that driveway in 2015 are now over a decade older, carrying the heavy weight of a murder charge on their conscience. The High Point Police Department and Crime Stoppers have kept Vann's file heavily active. They know that someone in the local community knows exactly who that young man with the distinct scar under his right eye was back in 2015. They know someone remembers a friend or a family member driving a gold or tan Honda and hanging out with a woman with dreadlocks during that freezing January week. A grandfather's life was stolen for a piece of lawn equipment. His family has spent over a decade waiting for the phone to ring, waiting for the moment the state of North Carolina finally delivers justice. Vann Yates deserved to grow old in the safety of his home. The people who took his life are still walking the streets, perhaps still carrying the scars of that winter afternoon. But a secret shared between 3 people is a fragile thing. If you or anyone you know recognizes the description of the man with the scar under his right eye, or remembers a tan Honda involved in the High Point robberies of January 2015, please do the right thing. Call High Point Crime Stoppers at 336-889-4747. Let's finally bring answers to Fairfield Street. What do you think happened to the getaway car that afternoon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Marcus Hayes, and this is Case Files After Dark. Stay safe out there, North Carolina.